Avanindra. There once was a bowl shaper named Avanindra. He was a good bowl maker, happy and satisfied with his labors, and his work was known throughout many villages. Avanindra finished his day's work. He took his bowls out of the kiln and looked them over, as he always did. He set them carefully on the shelves around his shop so that people could come and look at them next morning. Then he washed his hands, ate his evening meal, and went to bed. But that night, Avanindra couldn't sleep. His mind was full of thoughts of growing old, endless piles of clay bowls, endless years of lonely shaping and reshaping, until his hands became bent to the clay and his fingers became gnarled and cracked, making pots until the earth took him back and reshaped him. The next morning, Avanindra got up, ate his morning meal, and sat down to shape his first bowl of the day. But his skilled fingers no longer wanted this work, and the bowl he was intending to make became twisted and misshapen beneath his hands. He thought that maybe he was having a day of curses and spent the morning painting some of his earlier pots. But the next day he still couldn't make any bowls. By the third morning he was ticking over the mass of clay on his potter's wheel. His love Yamina came up and sat down next to him. Avanindra noted her presence with a nod, too absorbed in trying to fix his clay. He started to reshape it, but the clay refused to do his bidding. "It seems the clay is against you this morning," Yamina noted. "Ida is against me," Avanindra said. "Why are you saying that?" Avanindra shrugged a little, stood up, and walked out to the front of his open-air shop. Yamina came and stood with him there, and together they took in the sunrise. "I can't make a bowl anymore," Avanindra said in frustration. Yamina laid a hand on his shoulder in comfort. "Of course you can. You need some time away from it, a little while." Avanindra shook his head. "No, Yamina, I can feel it. The earth won't obey me anymore. The clay isn't shaping anymore. Something's wrong with me." Yamina thought for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe you've spent too long shaping bowls, Avanindra. Maybe you should do something else." "What can I do otherwise? This is what I know. What I know from my father and his father before him." Avanindra threw up his hands in frustration. "I'm not meant for anything else." Yamina laid her hands on his shoulders, looking up into his face. "Then maybe you should leave, Avanindra. Give it up. Go learn something from the world." "The world?" said Avanindra, smiling down at Yamina. "I may learn nothing from something so large." Yamina smiled. "You will learn nothing by sitting here. Go, Avanindra. See what you can see." Avanindra decided that he should spend a time in the wilderness, for he was confused and didn't know what to make of Yamina's words. He pondered these thoughts for 3 days and 3 nights without eating or sleeping. The gods spoke to him from the skies and the air and the river, but the goddess he had always known best, Ida, the one with her face near the sweet earth, did not speak to him. Avanindra was troubled at this and wondered what he should do. On the first night, the god of the skies, Indra, spoke to him, sending a fierce rain down upon his head, drenching him. And it was good rain, water for the farmer's crops. Avanindra did not run from the rain, nor did he cover his face and head from it. He lay down on the ground with his face towards the sky and let it soak through him. The second night, the god from the air, Vayu, spoke to him, blowing an angry breeze across his face. He didn't build a shelter against it, nor did he turn his back on it. Instead, he sat with his face into the wind and breathed deeply. The third night, he sat by the river Ganges and listened to it sing to itself. He didn't move when the mud on the bottom was around his feet, nor when it tried to tug him off downstream. Ganga was telling him where to go, and Avanindra would follow its course. On the fourth morning, Yamina came to him and asked him if he knew now where he should go and what he should do. Avanindra said he did, and the river had told him that there were many things to be found at its mouth, many miles away. That was where he would go. So he kissed Yamina goodbye and set off on his journey, taking a small pack and some supplies for the long walk. On the 5th day of his travels, he reached the mouth of the river. It was indeed a strange place. The river widened out as far as the eye could see, and within this widening there were many boats and rafts and barges of all kinds. He was so entranced by the many boats floating in the water that he decided he would learn to be a fisherman. He found a good fisherman there who would take on an apprentice and joined him on his boat. He reveled in the rough feel of the net in his fingers and the movement of the water beneath the keel of the boat. Surely this was the life for him. They pulled up the first silvery net full of fish late that afternoon. Avanindra could see their shiny scales and flopping bodies. He felt a little sorry for them, and asked the fisherman if he ever felt sorrow over the fish he caught. The fisherman blinked at Avanindra. "They're fish." "But don't you feel guilty for doing this to them?" The fisherman shrugged his shoulders. "I used to feel a little guilt, I guess. But Meenakshi blesses me with fish. I don't question her gift." Avanindra nodded, pondering this thought as they set off into the dark night, hoping to catch many fish before dawn broke. He spent many days on that boat, learning the trade of a fisherman. He still felt guilt about the fish in the net, and he silently apologized to the fish he caught, wondering if they accepted his forgiveness. One dark night, while they were fishing out in the great deep waters of the river mouth, a storm blew up. Avanindra and the fisherman fought to turn the boat towards the shore, hoping that the wind would blow them home, but a great wave smashed into the boat and broke it, throwing the two out into the deep water. Avanindra didn't know how to swim, and amid the tossing waves and pouring rain, he couldn't find his way back to shore. He grabbed onto a piece of the broken boat and clung to it for many days. When Avanindra finally washed ashore, he was in a far distant land with many mountains. He climbed upward into those mountains for many hours. Soon the cold numbed his fingers and dulled his senses, and the thin air did not placate the burning in his lungs. Avanindra began to see visions of the gods above him, urging him onward towards the summit of the mountains. At first, Avanindra trusted these visions, but when he had climbed for time beyond counting and shuddered with cold and fear for just as long, his faith in the gods began to fail him. He no longer prayed for their help. He no longer begged for their mercy. Finally, when Avanindra could take his suffering no longer, he lay down in the snow of those mountains, weak and exhausted, unable to go on any further. Soon the cold and the snow placed him into a deep and deadly sleep. But soon that lethal slumber was disturbed, and Avanindra awoke to find that someone was carrying him to a small wooden hut hanging precariously near the edge of a mountain cliff, that a bearded old man with rough hands and gentle eyes fed him and kept him warm under many blankets until all the cold was driven from his limbs and he was well enough to walk again. The days of spring were long in coming to the mountains, but although he missed home terribly, Avanindra didn't know how to find his way back. He stayed with the man, helping him to chop wood and to hunt for food in the snowy forest. The man taught him many things, what trees carried what names, and what animals to look out for, and which were harmless to them. When the snows finally melted and the grasses began to cover the hillsides, the man took Avanindra out to an outcropping not far from the hut and showed him the valley far below him, the ocean from which Avanindra had come. "Why did you come here, Avanindra?" the man asked. "Why did you swim in the ocean and climb my mountain?" Avanindra sighed. "I was lost in a storm." The man smiled tiredly and then said, "I was too. I have been here for many years. Sometimes I think I know why I came up the mountain and never came down, but then I realize I do not understand." He turned to Avanindra. "Your place is not with me anymore, Avanindra. Your place is far below, in the valleys, across the oceans. You are not made for the mountains. You were made for the clay." "But the clay doesn't obey me anymore. I've forgotten how. I learned to fish and hunt instead, how to tell tree from tree, how to track in the snowfall." The man grinned. "You may have learned these things, but your hands—" He took hold of Avanhindra's hands and turned them over. "Your hands are wide and bold hands, soft and long-fingered, gentle and broad for the task Ida asked of you. Ida designed you for clay, not for the hunt. And now you must go on. I have chosen my way, and so must you go yours. Farewell, Avanindra, clay shaper. I bid you well." The man gave him clothes and food for the rest of the journey over the mountains, enough to last him many days. He told him where to walk upon the stones so that he did not land in a crack and become lost forever, somewhere buried inside the mountain. Avanindra traveled for several days, climbing higher and higher, until the morning, when he reached the top of the mountain. A wide green valley lay below him, and his heart lightened. As he came down the mountainside, almost running through the flowers and wild growth at his feet, he thanked the gods that they had brought him to this day. He felt the sunlight glance across his face, and he knew that all was well between himself and the heavens. He walked downward into the pleasant spring air, and soon he reached the flatlands below. Here there were farmers, their fields planted, and their crops begun for the year. Workers were needed to keep the weeds from choking the young plants, and Avanindra became one of these. He found he liked the work, tending to the fields. The farmers were good, solid people. He found the earth beneath his hands warm and loving once again, and he found his heart longing for the clay bowls he had once made a long time ago. He worked for his season, tending to the plants and watching the fruits of his labor expand before his very eyes. Soon it was harvest time, and Avanindra helped collect all that had grown that summer and put it away in the storehouses for the village. It was time for Avanindra to go back over the mountains where he had come from. While saying farewell to the farmers he had helped, Avanindra asked, "Why do you do what you do? Why do you grow plants, if only to watch them flower and die before your eyes? I know we must eat, but why are you growing these and not doing other things?" One farmer chuckled and said, "I do what I do because my father did it, and his father before that. I do not know how to do anything else." Another said, "I do what I do because God sent me to this work, and I am happy to please them." Still a third said, "Farmers are close to the gods, Avanindra. They are above us, watching us. They tend to us. We flower and give for a time, and then we die as well. This is the way of things." Avanindra nodded, pondering this, and saying farewell, he started off on the journey back over the mountains. It was a hard climb, back over the stones and rocks of the peak he had come down in the spring, but the thought of home kept Avanindra's feet from wearying and his heart joyful. Soon enough he reached the summit and started down on the other side, worried that the winter snows would catch him before he could make it down to the foot of the mountain. He reached the ocean several days later, and wondering how he would ever traverse it, he began to walk along the shoreline, hoping to find a good boat to cross it with. He found a small village upon the shoreline, where he traded many of his remaining supplies for a boat sturdy enough to cross an ocean. The fishermen there warned against his traveling, for winter was coming, and fierce storms might take him completely by surprise out on the sea. But Avanindra was eager for home, and no amount of warning would persuade him. He got into his boat and began the long journey across the sea, back towards the land of his birth. It was a long voyage for Avanindra Clay Shaper, as storms bashed his boat from side to side, and fierce waves threatened to drown him where he sat, unable to see the stars and desperate to view land, hoping he would not be blown far off course. Cold rain drenched him, and made him long for a good fire, but home was not far away. If only he could see the land again. When the storms finally subsided, he saw a faint strip of green in the distance, and paddled his boat towards it. There he found the fishing village where he had once caught many fish, and the river where his journeys had begun long ago. He sold his boat for food and warm clothes, and he traveled up the river's bank back towards his village. There he found his shop, his bowls on their shelves and his potter's wheel, as it had always been. Avanindra smiled to himself, pleased that everything was in its place. He did not notice Yamina standing just inside his door, watching him. She had been watching Avanindra shop for him, knowing he would come home and want things just so. She could see that the time away had changed Avanindra, had molded him into something new. His hair was longer, his shoulders were broader, his legs were like 2 oak trees, strong and solid. She smiled too, knowing his travels through the world had done him well. He turned, and realized Yamina was grinning at him happily, glad to see him home. "Namaste," Avanindra said. "Namaste," Yamina said. Avanindra kissed her and said, "I have seen the world. I have traveled oceans and mountains. I have caught fish and cut trees and tilled fields." She smiled up into his face. "And what did you learn?" "I learned that the gods give fish, and they give trees, and oceans, and fields, and mountains, and crops." Avanindra paused and thought a moment. "But only we can make those things flower and grow." Yamina smiled again. "That's a good lesson to have learned. But will it help you shape the clay? Have you found Ida's favor again?" Avanindra laughed. "If I know I'm in control of the clay, Yamina, then what else is there to know? Ida sings to me, and I am content." And with that, he sat down at his potter's wheel and began mixing the clay for shaping again. Yamina sat by him, watching everything he did so she might learn how to make bowls too. For the rest of his days, Avanindra shaped and shaped the clay he loved so well. With Yamina at his side, he became a molder of bowls, a maker of jars, a master of the clay, and joy went into everything he made. The end.